Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Season 3 of Lost. This video is a part of a series of videos I'm doing where I review each season of Lost. Spoiler warning for the entire series, as I talk freely about what occurred in the entire series run of Lost. So if you haven't seen the entire series of Lost, you may want to hold off on watching this video until such a time that you have. So, Season 3, for those of you who had watched it on DVD or the internet afterwards, you may not be aware that the season was aired differently in the US, where the first 6 episodes of the series were shown, and then there was a several-month break until the rest of the series, which was about, I think, 17 or 18 episodes, were shown. In retrospect, the showrunners called this a failure, as the first 6 episodes weren't that well received, and they claimed this airing was partially to blame because you had to wait so long for the payoff of things that they were setting up. To which I say yes and no. Part of the reason why this was to blame was because these episodes weren't that good. At the end of Season 2, everyone was really excited to see the others in full swing and what they would really be like as Jack, Kate, and Sawyer were captured by them. However, I mostly found this quite disappointing as we didn't really delve too much into what made the others unique, and instead they just came off as normal Americans who just happened to be a bunch of violent assholes with a superiority complex. That part of this was because the showrunners wanted to leave some things a mystery, so they did not blow through the storyline too quickly and run out of material for later seasons, which I understand. However, it's clear to me that part of the problem is that they didn't have a clear-cut understanding of who the others really are and just some rough outline. In fact, I would even say they never really knew fully who they really were, as I felt they were never fully flushed out and developed. And I'm not talking about this typical thing always brought up specifically with Lost about unanswered questions. This isn't about answering questions. This is about having three-dimensional, fully developed characters that are real and are interesting, like any good movie, book, or TV show should do. And I felt this was never done with the others as a whole. And that the producers were just working off some vague idea of island worshippers that was never fully developed. Some specific characters of the others were fully fleshed out and developed, particularly people like Ben and Juliet, but not the group as a whole. But as I said, there were good things about the first set of the episodes. The opening shot of the season, for example, was another classic Lost scene where everything you thought you knew was flipped on its head, where it introduces us to the character of Juliet, as she seems to be a woman living in some American suburban neighborhood, but then you find out that no, she's one of the others, and that they're actually living on the island. Plus you get this plane crash from the other's perspective as Ben orders Ethan and Goodwin to infiltrate the survivors. An amazing scene, as it's the first time we see what the others are actually like. Also, there were some tense moments, particularly with the mid-season cliffhanger where Jack takes advantage of the surgery thing in order to blackmail the others into letting Kate and Sawyer go. Just as Sawyer was about to be killed, man, that was super intense. It really gets me super pumped, when Jack screams, "Damn it, Kate, run!" It was just so intense. We also get, in my opinion, one of the best Jin and Sun flashbacks, where we learn Sun was actually having a full-on affair with that dude who was teaching her English in Season 2, and then her father finds out and sends Jin to kill him. One of the most intense flashbacks in this series, in my opinion. Plus, in the island storyline of that episode, we see Sun narrowly escapes capture from the others, also intense. And who doesn't love the scene where Juliet played that videotape for Jack? The videotape of her holding the signs telling Jack to kill Ben in the surgery. That was just great. However, there were a lot of bad moments in this episode as well, the most notable being the poorly executed death of Mr. Echo, the most beloved character introduced in the second season, who was killed off basically because the actor didn't want to be on the show anymore, and the poor way in which it was executed made that kind of obvious. I often think how much better the show would have been had they not killed Echo. And as I said, the whole Kate, Sawyer, and Jack being held captive by the others was not nearly as interesting as everyone hoped it would be. And they had some ridiculous plot about Locke saving Mr. Echo from the polar bear. That was just dumb. And I have to talk about how Desmond, Locke, and Mr. Echo were in the Swan Station when it imploded at the end of Season 2, and at the start of Season 3 they're inexplicably alive and just wake up separately in different parts of the jungle. Now, there was once an episode of The Simpsons where Lucy Lawless was speaking about Xena at a convention, and there were a bunch of nerds who were just asking her nitpicky questions about continuity errors and stuff like that. And finally she says, "Every time you notice something like that, a wizard did it." And then someone else tries to ask her another question like that, and she says, "Wizard." So Lost had a similar thing going where you can imagine Damon Lindelof and the other writers in the room going, okay, we want Desmond, Locke, and Mr. Echo to still be alive and wake up in different parts of the jungle, but we can't think of any reason to explain why this would happen. And someone else speaks up and just says, hey, I know, why don't we just say the island did it? And hence that became their go-to explanation whenever they wanted to do something weird but didn't want to explain it or, have it make logical sense. They just said, oh, the island did it, or it was the will of the island. However, to be clear, as far as the Desmond, Locke, and Mr. Echo inexplicably waking up in the jungle, fine. I'll buy it. I'll buy it this time since it involves some major bizarre electromagnetic event. So this time, when they said the island did it, it's sort of borderline ridiculous, but I mostly let them off the hook for it. But in later seasons, this gets much worse and becomes unforgivable. But I'll get to that when I do a review of those later seasons. So I also want to talk about the whole surgery thing, because basically the premise we're meant to accept in Season 3 is the day the plane crashed on the island, Ben found out he had cancer, which he would need surgery for in order to survive. And we're meant to believe sometime in Season 2 he concocted a plan to use Michael in order to capture Jack, Kate, and Sawyer, so that they could use Kate and Sawyer in order to manipulate Jack into doing surgery to save Ben's life. The problem is, this is almost entirely inconsistent with what we saw in the first two seasons. First of all, it's been established that the others had the ability to leave and return to the island with the submarine, and it wasn't until the electromagnetic event in the Season 2 finale that they lost this ability. So if Ben found out he had cancer at the time of the pilot episode, then he had over 3 months to either go off island and have this fixed, and then return to the island, or to bring someone else to the island in order to fix him. After all, they brought Juliet to the island to deal with their medical issues. I don't know why they couldn't just do the same with Ben's cancer. Just a reminder, Ben concocted this plan during the second season before they lost the ability to leave and return to the island. And at this stage, they had no idea that they would lose this ability, which apparently they have had for a very long time. Secondly, if they wanted to capture Jack, Kate, and Sawyer, they need not concoct this elaborate plan to use Michael, and which part of that plan would involve them having to give up Walt. Just another side note here, it was made clear in the Season 2 finale that Ben wasn't aware nor happy with the deal that they had made with Michael to let Walt go while he was being held captive. But the point is, they could take Cindy just a few miles out from the fuselage survivors camp, right under everyone's noses, and get away with it scot-free, but they couldn't come up with a way to capture Jack, regardless of all the adventures he's taking alone or with a mere handful of people away from the camp. But what's worse is there is one specific example where the others had Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Locke, another character whom we learn the others wanted. So they had all four of these characters, and they just let them go. That was in the second season episode, The Hunting Party, in which the others captured Michael and Kate, but used Kate to force Jack, Sawyer, and Locke to give up their guns before just letting all four of them walk back to camp. So, what we're supposed to believe here is Ben's master plan was to let Jack, Sawyer, Kate, and Locke, the four people he specifically wanted, to just walk back and return to camp so that they could capture Michael and then use him in this elaborate plot in order to capture the three people they already just let go of. I'm sorry, this surgery thing just doesn't fit, and it's entirely inconsistent with everything they set up in 2 previous seasons. So, after the break, we come back with 2 strong episodes. The first one being Not in Portland, where we get our first full-on flashback episode that focuses on another, that tells the story of how Juliet came to the island. And on the island, we get the story of Kate and Sawyer trying to escape the other's grasp. And I actually have a problem with this because at the end of the previous episode, they made it seem like the others were completely under Jack's control and would do whatever he wanted to keep Ben alive. Then, all of a sudden, at the start of this episode, they instantly, magically changed to not really caring what Jack would do and wanting to recapture Sawyer and Kate anyway, and being all Benjamin, who cares if he dies? And it seemed an artificial way to create tension because if the others simply just let Kate and Sawyer go, then there could be no intense chase scenes through the jungle where Alex comes to save the day. I didn't quite buy it, but it was still a good, intense episode. But let me take a little time to talk about Juliet, because as I mentioned in my review for Season 2, I was not a big Juliet fan and actually preferred Ana Lucia to her because she was just so arrogant. I can't stand arrogance. Plus, there's just something about her that I just didn't like. I mean, I didn't completely hate her character, but I was never really on board with her that much and was never really invested in her relationship with Jack. But getting back to the episodes, the other in the pair of good episodes after the show returned from the break was one of my favorite episodes of the series, Flashes Before Your Eyes, where we get the first example in the show of a time travel episode that flips the whole flashback method of storytelling on its head, where it's not a flashback as much as Desmond's actually traveling back in time and reliving the moment. And we, of course, get the tragic backstory of Desmond and Penny's romance, which is relevant to Desmond's current day state of mind and emotions, while epically setting up the rules of time travel the series would follow in a really creepy and intense way that was just amazing. This episode also set up what was another important storyline of Season 3, and that is that Desmond's visions of the future, that he specifically saw Charlie's doom. As I said in my Season 2 review, it was obvious in Season 2 they didn't know what to do with Charlie, which is why in Season 3 they concocted the storyline about his impending demise to make him relevant again. And I dare say it really worked. This became a very interesting driver in Season 3 that helped add to the richness of the overall storytelling and was paid off beautifully in the finale. But after these episodes, the season goes downhill, because right after one of the best episodes of the series, we get the absolute worst episode of the entire series, Stranger in a Strange Land, that has these ridiculous, nonsensical flashbacks of Jack in Thailand, where some irrelevant plot about Juliet being put on trial plays on the island, which is followed by a fun but silly and irrelevant Hurley episode. So now I want to talk about the flashbacks in Season 3. I would put forward the argument that Season 1 had some of the best flashbacks because we were just getting to know all the characters, so the flashbacks could be really intense and interesting, and the flashback method of storytelling really worked for that season. But by Season 3, they had pretty much used up all the interesting backstories of the characters, so the flashback method felt more like a gimmick that they were obligated to do rather than anything that actually enhanced the story. And we undeniably got the worst flashbacks of the series in Season 3. We got this horrible flashback about Locke being in some hippie commune that was completely irrelevant to his overall story arc. We get this completely repetitive flashback of Saeed being tortured for torturing someone, where he admits he deeply regrets torturing people, which we already knew about like forever ago. Alright, I already talked about Jack's ridiculous Thailand fiasco, and then there was Sun Jin flashback right after they got married, where Sun was blackmailed by Jin's birth mother, who was a prostitute, which again is just repeating the same things we already knew about these characters and is completely irrelevant to the future stories. We get more irrelevant Kate flashbacks with her getting married and going to talk to her mother, Sawyer in jail, Hurley meets his dad. What was I talking about? Oh, sorry. And even we get a pointless Desmond flashback about him being a monk when he's a character who's just been introduced, and he surely has more interesting stories to tell. So in Season 3, this whole flashback thing was just becoming tired and overused, which I suspect the writers knew, which is why by the end of the season they plotted out a way to eliminate them in future seasons, which I'll get into when I do my reviews for future seasons, because I don't think it entirely worked out. But it was definitely a noticeable downside of Season 3, something I hold against it. So anyway, next time we get a trio of episodes where Locke, Kate, Sawyer, and Rousseau go on a journey to rescue Jack, and instead discover Mikhail, who becomes a landmark villain of Season 3. These were good, decent episodes, ending of course with the epic The Man from Tallahassee, where Locke totally messes up Jack and Juliet's ride, and we finally learn how Locke got in the wheelchair. And then we get another lot of mediocre to bad episodes, including the horrible Left Behind, where Kate and Juliet get some girl-on-girl action with mud wrestling. This episode didn't quite make my top 5 worst episodes, but it was definitely considered. And another episode being Exposé. So I think I'm going to take a little time out here to talk about Nikki and Paolo, as they were another signature feature of Season 3, one in which the majority considered a failure. When I first heard the idea of the show taking 2 background characters and elevating them to the status of main character, I was really excited at this prospect, as I found the whole concept really appealing. The showrunners said the idea was based off of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Lower Decks, which was an episode devoted solely towards some of the junior officers on the Enterprise to see how they lived. And indeed, Exposé did feature prominently many other minor characters we saw in the first 2 seasons, such as Arts and Ethan. But as Season 3 was airing, the majority of the people hated Nikki and Paolo, and I mean hate with a capital H. There was an unbelievable amount of complaining concerning them, and at the time I was really against all this hate they were getting, and was really pissed off when this show killed them, which appeared to me to just be buckling from the pressure, because as I said earlier, I was really on board with the whole Nikki and Paolo idea. However, looking back on it now, I see that the problem wasn't with the concept of elevating 2 minor characters. The problem was with the execution, and the whole Nikki and Paolo thing was just poorly executed. First off, it was the way they introduced these characters, which They just came out of nowhere when all of a sudden you see these two people you don't recognize talking to the main characters and acting like main characters all of a sudden. And, you know, just the natural reaction to that is, who the hell are these people? And to imply that they've been there the whole time, but just been off screen, makes the viewer feel out of the loop, and therefore their natural reaction is going to be to reject them. A better way to introduce them would have been to drop hints about them for a long time before introducing them. For example, there was this whole Scott and Steve thing in season 1 where they mentioned several times you know, these characters who everyone else would get them confused. And even after Scott died, they'd still get their names mixed up. These characters were never actually introduced on screen, but audiences would have been more accepting if they were. In fact, many fans wanted to see them. Another example is Frogurt, who got several mentions in season 2, whom many fans speculated about. So eventually he was cast and made an appearance on a webisode, and then graduated to getting a speaking role in the first 2 episodes of season 5, where he was killed off. And fans were much more accepting of his appearance because he was gradually introduced. It's obvious the Nikki and Paolo thing was a last-minute thought at the introduction of season 3, but if they wanted to do it right, they would drop mentions about them throughout the first several episodes of season 3, and then have them make several small appearances in the next batch of episodes, and then bring them in as full-fledged main characters at the end of the season. In fact, I would recommend beginning their introduction as main characters with their own flashback, rather ending them with their own flashback. This gradually introducing would make the audience feel more in the loop, and they'd be less likely to just reject these two strangers who just appeared out of nowhere. Secondly, actually make them important. It's been noted that Nikki and Paolo were the creation of 2 other writers involved on Lost, and it was obvious Damon Lindelof was never fully on board with this idea, as he constantly makes comments apologizing for them or to point out that they weren't his idea. So in other words, it was obvious he wasn't committed to the idea and therefore did a half-assed job. If you want audience to like these new characters who had apparently been there the whole time but we never saw, make them mean something. Make their introduction relevant to the overall plot. There were rumors floating around that Nikki and Paolo's flashback episode would feature a huge surprise vital to the storyline, and although Expose was a neat little episode that was cool to see the events of the first 3 seasons through someone else's perception, it was not vital to the overall story arc, so it was just a distraction. If you want the audience to care about these characters, make them important. Don't freaking kill them off as soon as you get their backstory. It makes the audience feel like they wasted their time. So the Nikki and Paolo thing was a good idea. They just weren't committed enough to make it work. In fact, some of the best Nikki and Paolo scenes can be found in the special features of the DVD, as they were deleted. There were some scenes introducing them with this misunderstanding with Claire that I think would have helped make their introduction a lot more palatable for audiences, but they were deleted. Also, the best scene of Expose, in my opinion, is the scene that shows the hatch implosion and the purple sky event from Nikki's perspective, that I think really explores her characters and makes them really sympathetic and interesting characters, and they deleted it from the fucking episode. Guess it didn't matter at that point since they were just going to kill him off anyway, but it still pisses me off. So back to season 3. Then we get a set of interesting episodes that set up the ending with Juliet coming to the 815ers camp and Naomi crashing on the island. These were some good episodes, but the events in this season just happened a bit too slow, which brings me to another problem I have with season 3 I want to talk about, which is probably the biggest problem I have with season 3, is that it was obvious that since the showrunners had no idea of how long the show was going to run for, they were meandering and spreading things out for far too long. The whole pacing of the show kind of got messed up. Damon Lindelof made it clear that just before the ending of season 3, they struck a deal with ABC that defined how long the show would last, that there would be 3 more shortened seasons, and this allowed them to make the last batch of episodes in season 3 that were very concise, very directly leading to something. However, pretty much everything in season 3 before this point was just a bit too stretched out, a bit too unfocused. It's not surprising to me that Lost a majority of its viewership in season 3, as people were getting a bit tired of a show built on mysteries going nowhere. This is also a problem with Lost being a pioneer of the 21st century serialized drama, which is all too commonplace nowadays. Shows nowadays such as Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones had the benefits of shows that came before them, such as Lost, and now have mechanisms in place to support this format. One of the most notable traits is the shorter seasons. The 24 to 25 episode per season format seems a bit dated now, which shows like The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad having 16 per season and Game of Thrones doing a mere 10. I dare say Lost would have benefited from the shorter season format a bit earlier, particularly in season 3, that had way too many filler episodes that made people lose interest. Also, shows like Game of Thrones lock their main cast in contracts so they don't just quit and leaving them to come up with lame excuses to kill off beloved main characters. I know season 1 and 2 had their fair share of filler episodes, but to me season 3 was the worst, and it was obvious to me that the producers were just delaying because they had no idea how long they needed to plan ahead for, and they weren't certain what they were building to. So next up we get the last batch of episodes, which in my humble opinion is where season 3 really shines. They're some of the best episodes and best moments of the entire series, and what really helped establish Lost as one of the greatest shows to ever air on television. First we get The Brig, where Sawyer and Locke's long-term story arcs collide and are ultimately resolved. And then we get The Man Behind the Curtain, the episode we've been waiting for all season that finally delves into Ben's past and helps explain the history between the others in the Dharma Initiative and what happened to them. It also made Jacob the front and center figure in the Lost universe after having his name dropped from time to time. Although I'm unhappy with how they tied the Jacob part of this episode to future seasons, which I think they did a poor job of in the future. And after that comes the greatest hits, the perfect send-off to a beloved character that was an awesome setup for the most epic season finale of any show through the Looking Glass. This is such an amazing finale for so many reasons. For me, one of the things that make this episode so great was I was getting so tired of the others constantly being 2 steps ahead of the plane crash survivors and constantly kicking their asses. This is part of the problem I had with the first set of episodes of the season, because Ben said he wants the boat, so he gets the boat. The others always win. So it was so satisfying to see the 815ers finally get the better of them. First they blow them up, and then Hurley, of all people, comes to save the day with his VW bus. And the epic journey up to the radio tower to call for rescue, and we get Jack and Ben's epic confrontation. That's one of my favorite scenes of the whole series. And of course we get one of the best deaths of a main character on any TV series, where Charlie sacrifices himself so his friends can find rescue. It was truly heartbreaking. And To top it all off, we get the most epic surprise ending in Lost history, where we discover the flashbacks in this episode weren't really flashbacks at all, but flash forwards to 3 years in the future, where Jack and Kate made it off the island, but Jack is so depressed and suicidal because he desperately wants to get back to the island, which came as a huge shock because on the island storyline in this episode, he's so incredibly desperate to leave the island. It was amazing that they show, at the same time that he's making a huge mistake. So overall, Season 3 has some of the best moments in the entire series, which really makes this one of the highlights of the series, that really enriches the entire series and builds off the greatness of what Lost was established in Season 2. But even though I would say Season 3 has a lot more great episodes and great moments than Season 2, I do feel it meanders a bit with too many filler episodes, and it takes too long to make its point, and is full of notable blunders such as the Nikki and Paolo thing, Mr. Echo's death, the way that the others were handled in the first few episodes, and a lot of useless flashbacks. So my rating for Season 3 is a 9. Excellent. A fantastic season, a great television show that contains some of the best moments of the series, but it has a few issues. So that's it for my review of Season 3 of Lost. I'll put links in the description below for my other Lost reviews, and you should subscribe to keep up with future Lost videos I'll be doing. And thanks a lot for watching.